welcome back everyone to Are We Nearly There Yet? My name is Sonia and I'm the families lead at Kerith Community Church. I'm also a mum, so I love having conversations with people about different aspects of parenting and family life and the journey that we all find ourselves on as parents. So this week is actually the last episode in our season 2 of Are We Nearly There Yet? And I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I took it a little bit personal this week and recorded a conversation with my very own husband, James. I hope that you enjoy this week's episode. Some of the things we'll talk about might be specific to us and not relevant to you, but I hope that you'll be able to draw some parallels. Those of you who are married that are listening, those of you who are married who've got children, I hope you'll be able to draw some parallels and think about things in your own marriage, and maybe you want to count the amount of times that I say the word intentional, because it seems to be that I say it quite a lot. We hope you enjoy this episode and thank you for supporting us so far. So I'm joined this week for our end of season 2 special by probably my favourite ever podcast guest. Welcome to the podcast, James.
Hello there, everybody. Welcome. This is the one you've all been waiting for.
And when I do like the way I said possibly my favourite guest. No, definitely my favourite guest. So James, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everybody. I am James and I am married to Sonia. We live in a house together with 4 children who are 13, 11, 7 and 7. So that's my family here. The rest of my family, I am the oldest of, I've got 2 younger brothers. Sonia just held up 3 fingers.
Because I wasn't sure that you knew.
I'm the oldest. I've got 2 younger brothers. And I've got a mum. Mum is married to Wes. They've been married for, it'll be 24 years this year. So Wes is granddad to our kids, stepped in to that family. Never been married before, didn't have any kids of his own. So really it was a big jump coming to our noisy family with 3 boys. Has been that father figure for us through these years. And I guess one of the things to talk about is that they got married a few years after my dad died. My dad died when I was about 17, when I was 17. So that's my family and kind of some of the stuff that probably we'll talk about as we go on.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that. So your dad died just before you were 18, wasn't it? When you were 17. And tell us some memories from childhood of your family, like before that point.
So yeah, family growing up, I think, was shaped by a few things, and there are a few things I can kind of point to and say were significant in family growing up. So one of those was, as part of my dad's job, we lived in a couple of different countries. So he worked for British Airways, and when I was quite young, we lived in Poland for 18 months or so, a couple of years, and then a bit after that, we lived in Denmark for about 2.5 years. That's kind of one of those things that as a family, I think we look back on and kind of shapes as a family. You're all kind of often a bit of an adventure together in somewhere new and different and doing different things. And I think that's something that brings the family together and makes you a bit of a unit going and doing different things. And I think also maybe shapes my view now of families are like, that we're on a kind of an adventure together. We've all talked about, haven't we, like, wouldn't that be amazing to do one day, to go and live in a different country? And I think that's coloured by the kind of really positive experience I had growing up.
Yeah, we're holding out, aren't we, for Kerith, like Australia or Kerith, New York or
somewhere like that. And so yeah, came back when I was starting what today would be year 3, I think. So yeah, so lived abroad for a few years, and because of Dad's job as well, that meant that we got British Airways flights. So we'd also go off on holidays and go into different places and do that kind of thing where because the flight was free, we'd go off to somewhere interesting. It wasn't like we'd go off on lavish holidays, but we'd go on holidays that were places that were a bit of a way away. So I remember going on, like, driving across Texas or going to different places in Canada for a few weeks. So I guess growing up, I just remember just being a kind of I don't really remember anything kind of negative about my family. I remember being together and living in different countries.
We often say, don't we? I'll talk about a children's TV program from when I was young, and you won't know it because you were out of the country.
Yeah, so there's a chunk of kind of culture and kid stuff that I know about through through culture rather than having lived through experiences. So if it's a TV show or something like that. So yeah, growing up, kind of holidays were something that we liked doing, and living in a couple of different countries and going on aeroplanes. So I liked going on aeroplanes, and because of the nature of staff travel, we'd get on that plane and we'd have to fit in wherever the empty spaces were. So I was that kind of 8-year-old on a plane sitting by himself in the smoking section when there was a smoking section of the plane, because that's how we'd all have to scatter around a plane. And also good plane etiquette, which I enforce on our family now.
Yes.
Number one rule being, what's the number one rule when you're waiting to get on a plane?
We have to have everything ready to hand over.
You have to have everything ready in your hands and always be the...
I don't know, what?
You have to be don't be those people who queue up to get on the plane. You want to be the last people on the plane.
Oh, yes. Last people on the plane. But also when we're going through check-in, when we went on a lovely big holiday, didn't we, a few years ago to California with 4 quite young children at the time. We were very fortunate to be able to do that at the time. And we sped through all the check-in and immigration and everything, didn't we? Because we were not those, we didn't want to be that family that held up all the other travellers, especially the travellers without kids.
And that also transfers into theme park etiquette.
Theme park
professionals know when you get to the front of the queue in the theme park.
Know how many in your party.
And the people say how many, and it's at that point that people look around and go like that. So I'm like, theme park etiquette, getting on the plane well.
Yeah.
These are things that I think I've kind of absorbed in growing up.
And brought into our family. So, so holidays, experiences were a big deal. And I know you've often said to me, like, yes, your dad died much younger than he should have done, like in terms of you don't want to lose your dad when you're 17. He was like late 40s, wasn't he? But you actually packed so much into that time before he died as a family. You did loads of experiences. You went away loads. And not everyone has free flights and is able to travel the world like that. But experiences have been a big part that I think you've brought into our family. Yeah,
absolutely. I can remember watching, like, you have like TV game shows, and they would be like, you could win this big TV or win a car or win a like holiday to somewhere. And I remember my dad kind of saying, go for choose the experience, choose the thing to do. And I think, that continues and I don't know if that's just something that's you pick up through kind of osmosis as you're growing up, or that I've enforced on people, or that's just something we do. It's like, and I think for us, we don't have the world's biggest house, so we don't have all the stuff in the world. But sometimes we choose how we spend our money and spend our time as well, which is like doing stuff, and giving our kids experiences.
Yeah, that's good.
And doing stuff like that together.
And I don't know where that's come from for me, but yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. But we've been married how long?
For many years.
How long? I'm not going to hold up my fingers. How long have we been married, James?
15 years.
15 years. Well done. We've been married for 15 years. And when we got married, we went on the HTB marriage course, didn't we, before we got married? And one of the things they talk about is the kind of different family experiences you've had, or the different family culture and values that you've had growing up, and how that is going to, you bring in certain expectations, certain things you've learned from your own parents, marriage, or the culture in your family. And at the time they kind of ask you to project forward to, well, what's that going to be like when you have kids, or what's that going to be like when your parents are elderly? And at the time you can't really view any of that. You're kind of mid-wedding planning and just excited to be getting married and spending every moment together. Yeah, we had those conversations at the time, and we have kind of obviously merged into our family. I remember one of the first things you said to me, you wanted to be family with me. I remember quite early. Not
one of the first things I said to you.
No, not ever. But in one of our early dating, I remember you saying not necessarily that you wanted to have children, but you just said you wanted to be family with me, and I that really sticks in my mind. And I want to say, like, I personally, I think whether you have children or whether you don't have children, like, you still are a family. And so we were a family from the moment we got married, but we brought the different values and different experiences to our union and our family together. And I'd say it's not that we have massively different families, we don't have massively different we don't have different cultural backgrounds, or
probably quite similar, like small C cultural. But
but we have, we've got different, the tone is maybe different in our families, the vibe. I don't know how to describe
your family
that.
growing up and my family.
And your family growing up. And that's been quite interesting to navigate, like how we approach conflict, how we maybe approach different things with our kids. How have you found that? I mean, I'll say it so you don't have to. My family are more highly strung maybe, or overtly emotional. Your family are more chill, maybe more, I don't know how to.
So you're allowed to
say
say
it.
that about your family.
Yeah.
But yeah, some in my family, and I think in growing up as well, I can't, you've asked before, I can't remember my mum and dad having an argument.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't mean that I'm sure that that's not the case, that they didn't. I think it's one of those things sometimes when you're like a parent dies or something, you kind of maybe have this image of them. And I also didn't really have an adult relationship with my dad, you know? But I genuinely don't think it's looking back on like those tinted spectacles, but I can't remember like there being like lots of arguments or a big like argument in my family. My mum might tell me different. My brothers might tell me different. And I think that is reflected in my approach to conflict. And also kind of is reflected in my approach to actually dealing with or addressing kind of big things. I am, to a fault, pretty laid back. Yeah?
Yeah.
But
what do you mean to a fault?
And sometimes that's not always the right way to be.
Give us an example.
Give us an example. I mean, the example I often go to is if we go out for dinner, right? And if we're like at a restaurant, my food comes along and it's not right.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's absolutely fine. And your instinct is often to be quite like, well, that is the highlight of the meal.
No.
Do you know what I mean? If there's an opportunity, you're like, that's not right, you should send it back. I mean, rule number one is always be really nice to the people who are making food for you. But it's all, I can also thinking back, I can remember back kind of moments of being a bit cringy growing up, of thinking maybe when parents would have done that. But my instinct is to like, don't worry, it's all fine. And that might be like, they brought me chips instead of a jacket potato. But that might be in things that we encounter or stuff that comes up with other impacts on our family or things that our kids do. Things that our kids do might be a bit different.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting conversation, because I think that I think that's really, we've kind of met somewhere in the middle with that, haven't we? Because my experience was opposite growing up. Like, to use the example that you gave, like, I mean, customer service was like, I mean, I would hide in embarrassment behind the menu and my parents would dispute every single thing. Now, I don't think that's the way to be. And what did you say a few minutes ago? That's a highlight of my meal. I really don't think, I'd like you to recount that statement, actually.
But you do, like, you sit up straight and you're like, you should tell them.
Yeah.
But I think that's a silly example, but that's an example of like, I think we see that in other things. We see that in other things around our house and around our family, where I'm like, do you know what, that's fine.
And there are times when I think that's been a real education for me, in terms of realising this stuff doesn't matter. You know, I don't need to sweat this stuff. Like, wait for the bigger stuff that actually matters. Then there's other times when I think you apply the same thing to things that maybe do matter, and I've maybe kind of brought you a little bit more to, and you often have this like jokey saying like, oh, it's okay, no one died. And I do think that comes from a place of your experience, that when you have lost someone, a parent, you know, at that age, and you've kind of experienced one of the worst things to experience, so actually other things don't seem as big. And I think that's,
so it can be that.
Yeah, it needs to see that through that lens. But then
I think that's also reflected in sometimes how I feel about like families falling out. I don't really have a lot of sympathy or tolerance or time for people. And again, it's not really, you know, everyone's situation is different, and lots of people have gone through different things that are challenging and difficult. And just because I can't sit down and talk to my dad now doesn't mean that that thing that someone might be struggling with isn't important or significant.
Yeah.
But that's sometimes my reaction, do you know? And I'm like, if someone's moaning about something, this person's getting on my nerves, or this, you know, these people aren't getting on or falling out over something that I perceive to be not that important.
Yeah.
That's sometimes reflected in there as well.
Yeah.
So it's from big things to small things as well.
Yeah. And I think it's been applied to parenting in terms of, like, sometimes I'll talk, because I am thinking kind of like bigger or long term, or maybe sometimes more dramatically. So one of the children will say something to me and I will want to respond in a certain way because I'm thinking I want to respond in this way now to set the pattern of that for the future, and you're quite live in the moment, live in the now.
Yeah, that's another contrast in this, isn't it?
Yeah, and you will, maybe it isn't that big deal in that moment, but I am thinking like bigger picture with it, and you're more like focused in the moment.
I don't know if that's about growing up or culture. That might just be like how we are differently.
Yeah.
The example we'll laugh about, which is like you'll be sitting there and going like thinking of something like years in advance. I've been thinking about on
our children's wedding day.
Yeah. Or like something, or it might be holidays, or it might be
like holiday classic is
you'll go into quite a lot of detail thinking about something a long way away.
Yeah, like what classic I remember once about, we'd booked a holiday and it was like 9 months away, and I just come out with things like, I was thinking we should get a bag of croissants and some yogurts and apples and eat that on the way to the airport the morning we go, and you say,
and I'll say, yeah, that's great, we haven't got any food for dinner tonight.
what should we get out of the freezer? Yeah, but those differences, like, we could, this might sound a bit self-indulgent to people listening, like we're just chatting about ourselves, but I'm
giving you an insight into your host of many episodes.
But I wanted to talk a bit about like marriage in parenting, and actually the best person I can talk about that with is my own husband. Yeah. So everyone else will have their own examples of the differences that they bring. Everyone, whether you have children or not, when two people become married, they bring a whole load of their own experience, their life experience, their childhood experience, their family values that they grew up with, and there's a real blending that needs to take place, and that often needs to come with a compromise and we are now as one. What is our family value? What is our family culture going to be? And we set that ourselves. And I think in the beginning we probably weren't very intentional with that, but I think as time has gone on, we've become more intentional. And
I wonder if having more than the accepted average number of kids does that as well. I don't know at what point. Do you know what I mean? So we have 4 kids, and in the world today, you sometimes have it when I'm having conversations. I've kind of moved teams a little bit with people at work recently, and when you're just having a chat about what's going on at home, and I go, yeah, and I've got 4 kids, and they're like, oh my goodness, you've got 4 children.
Oh really? Because in church life, I think it's quite common to have more.
And then you go, yeah, it's great, but I wonder if the difference in having the extra children, the bonus extra unexpected.
One of the twins was obviously unexpected, because you don't know that you're going to have twins.
Having twins was
no, but you don't know that you're going to have twins. Yeah. That's what I mean.
But maybe thinking we were going to have 3 and ending up with being very wonderfully blessed to have 4. I don't know. Has that made? Do you think? So I'm going to ask you some questions. Do you think having that,
the tables
having 4 kids? I think there are definitely some things where our natural instincts is to be a bit more kind of laid back and go with the flow with a few things. The difference with having 6 sometimes is that you have to plan a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think, and
be a bit more intentional, to use one of your words.
When I look back, we've had to be much more intentional, I think, and I think we took to, I would say, and this sounds like I'm bigging us up, but we took to parenting quite well. I would say we had our first child. It didn't really faze us. Like you have taught me so much about parenting, and like the newborn stuff didn't really faze us. Then we had another one, and everything was great. And then we had the twins, and I had a very difficult pregnancy with the twins. Basically, didn't really leave my bedroom for about 6 months, and you were kind of trying to tie everything down, look after everything. And I think after the twins came along, which were, as you say, a massive blessing, things were easier for a while. But then I think we went through a couple of years where our marriage was not bad or in dire straits or anything, but under more pressure. Mm-hmm. And
which probably always comes along with lots of people.
Yeah, at different times.
When you get through the stage of little ones into...
They're actual people.
Yeah, but it's like actually your focus as a couple goes from we're a couple and we have these little ones to look after. Actually, your focus has to be on looking after them and them growing and their needs a little bit more as they grow up a bit more.
Yeah, and being quite intentional. So we had like a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old and twin newborn babies. And as you say, we could have kind of maybe winged it a bit with less. That was kind of fitted within our capacity, but we had to be more intentional. We had to be more planned, more organised. And I think, obviously, the more children we had, the more time that took away from each other, giving that time to each other. And looking back at that season, like, there was a season where it wasn't that we were, as I say, we weren't in a bad place, but we weren't in the healthiest of places, just because I think we were tired and we had the pressure. I think I probably had a bit of postnatal depression at the time. Maybe didn't really realise that I did at the time, but yeah. Or anyone, because there might be people listening to this who, they're married with kids and maybe they're feeling their marriage is not in the best place that it could be. Like, what things, looking back, do you think we did to prioritise our marriage and make improvements? Do you think couples do need to do those things?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You do, and that's one of the things that I'm not great at. And I think that reflects back to some of the things we talked about earlier. So I'm not great at like setting aside time, really kind of, booking a babysitter, let's go out somewhere. I am quite content sometimes to just coast along. Whereas you, rightly so, are often looking for more.
The big romantic gesture.
You're not there to settle and go, this is fine. So I think there are times, as in all the times, when I could do more to invest more into our marriage. And it's always the kind of straightforward things when we actually sit down and say, look, actually we need to address some of this stuff. Make time for each other, make a date night, whatever that looks like, a priority.
Yeah, and I think there are seasons, aren't there, where that's not as easy, and that's fine. I say not fine, but it's okay to. There are times when your children are really small and they need you for absolutely everything. There are times, we kind of intentionally had conversations and said we are prioritising them right now. The reality is, I believe that the best thing we can do for them is to love each other really well. And yeah.
And that's interesting now, I think, as well. We see that as they get a bit older, because that's a bit cringe.
for them,
to talk like a teenager, and I think we always want to be demonstrable of our love and our marriage and how that's really important. And you'll often say, maybe the older ones particularly, they'll be like, I want to come and give you a kiss and cuddle, talk about how wonderful you look or how much I love you, whatever. And
everyone at home is now puking.
No, because they can think of examples as well.
Yeah.
With their teenagers. So, but I think that's because we want our kids to know.
See a healthy marriage. Yeah. Maybe one where the mum doesn't interrupt the dad like I just did to you. Sorry, you were saying.
No, that's fine. I was at the end. We flow nicely together.
Yeah, and I think so. It's interesting. Like going back to the argument thing earlier. So my family was very argumentative. Still sometimes can be. I don't enter into it these days because I have changed. But they were, they are an argumentative, and actually they don't mean anything by it. It's just kind of like Absolutely. The flow. It's the way it is, and yours are not at all like that. But sometimes to the point where maybe things don't get said. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong with that.
Well, that's fine.
But so that was one of the things, wasn't it, as well? Like in terms of like when we have disagreements, which every person does, or disagree on a subject. Like I remember me saying, I want our children to see that it's okay to disagree, but you love one another through it. You show forgiveness, you show grace to one another. I think it's a really godly thing to do as well. It shows them, models that love that God has for us. I want them to see that through our marriage.
However, sometimes, yes, I agree. Also, there are times when you've been like, children should see us arguing, because then they can also see how we love each other through these things. Yeah. Whereas my instant reaction, and neither of these are necessarily right, is to be like, we don't need to argue. It's fine.
Yeah, and I don't think I actually stand with that anymore. I think that was when they were younger. I would say, oh yeah, they need to see us. I don't think they need to see us arguing. I think they need to see us demonstrating what forgiveness looks like. That's what I think. That's what I mean by that. Because actually, I've seen. We might have what we're just a disagreement over how the towels are piled or something. We're not having a proper argument. We're just like being a bit jokey.
Do you want to talk about how the towels are tiled?
we might just be
Towels are piled.
we might just be joking and bantering between. We know that it's banter between the two, but actually, I've seen in our children that not all of them, but one or two of them get a little bit like, oh, especially ones if their friends' parents are going through difficulties, they kind of look at us and I think, gosh, if this is how if what is I'm considering just a bantering, like joking around banter about the way the towels are piled in the airing cupboard, if that is making them feel a bit funny, like I would hate to think that. So I'm much more on board with you with that, and I think we've compromised and learnt from each other.
Talking about that, it is interesting how among our kids you can see as they get older, as their personalities continue to go and develop, how we've got 4 kids and we can kind of sometimes see that like 2 of them are a bit more like you.
Yeah.
And react to things that actually we see a little bit like in the ways that you react, or indeed even that like your family react. And there's 2 of them that are a bit more like me, who maybe aren't as like will retreat.
Yeah.
And that's one.
It's the hedgehog rhino thing, isn't it? That they talk about on the marriage course.
Hey, why don't you talk about that bit?
Well, explain it if anyone knows what that means.
So one of the things on the marriage course they talk about is how you, and Sonia will jump in now if I'm getting this wrong, because we work as a team, how you react to conflict. Now, do you react to it as a rhino, like when is it a conflict or
conflict or in anger?
It's like a rhino will put its head down and charge towards those things. Or a hedgehog, which like when there's conflict or they'll roll up into a ball, and hide, yeah. And I am a hedgehog and you are a rhino.
Yeah.
And we see that continuing in our kids. I think we have a couple who are more hedgehog and a couple who are more rhino.
Yeah.
I wonder what your listeners are, Sonia.
Yeah, I know. Are you a hedgehog or are you a rhino? I wonder. Have a work it out. Usually you get one of each in a they say, don't they? In a marriage. Both can be what's the word? Positive and both can have a negative effect. Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it? And I think we have changed and adapted over that.
I guess that's one of the things to think about here as well, is like how people change, how your attitudes to things change as you're together or married for longer, as you have a family that gets bigger. Yeah. Are there other things that you think that your attitude to bringing up kids or being a family has changed over the years?
Yeah, I think as much as we talked earlier about bringing a bit more structure and organisation, having more children in terms of we had to do that, there's also other things where we became less structured. Like, do you remember, your mum often laughs about how when we went on our first family holiday, as in you and me and Hudson, baby Hudson, went to Ibiza. We were going to Ibiza.
With them?
No, not with them. No, but to their place in Ibiza.
Okay.
And she mentioned a restaurant that opens up in the evening, somewhere nice. And apparently you said to her, we can't do that. We can't go out because Hudson will need to go to bed at like 6:30. We won't be going out anywhere. And then
I can imagine.
Yeah. And I remember when we used to get people to babysit him for the first time, we'd be very like, right, here's the list. Here's the, you play two rounds of this song, and you do. And then, so I think we really changed whilst some things became more structured and organised. The more children we added to our family, the less bothered we were about any of that stuff, and we become much more, I guess, more confident in our own parenting. And
I think some people in all sorts of things, it's control over situations, isn't it? If you're newer to something, or maybe, I don't know, this is my view, if you are less confident in something, the more you want control over it. And if you are a less experienced parent, that control can look like you do this, then you do this, and you do this. Yeah.
And some people might continue to have more children and still be in that kind of, routine is really important to them. And that's fine if that works for their family. For us, by the time we'd had Tilly, like we were going on holidays and just they were falling asleep in the pushchair and we were having a nice dinner together. So, yeah, I think
that is something that consciously we've maybe tried to do, which is be a family who can like
adapt,
or be like react kind of to different situations.
Yeah, which I think has actually we've seen this last year. We've seen, there's a lot.
What's happened this last year?
We've seen a lot. Our kids are pretty resilient.
People might listen to this like in the future on a
desert island.
Yeah, they might not know.
we talk about holidays a lot, I've noticed. We've talked about holidays a lot in this. But yeah, there might be people who, over this last year with COVID, there's some people who will have found this will have really thrown them, children and adults, and other people have kind of gone with the flow a bit more. Yeah, it's been an exercise in learning resilience and adaptability. Is that the word? Yeah. For all of us. So, yeah. So, we're coming to the end of our time together, but
we're at the end of our time together.
No. Don't say that.
The end of our
podcast recording together. But yeah, what would you say to anyone who's feels in the thick of it with parenting, and like can't see the wood for the trees, and like their marriage doesn't seem like it is in the priority where it should be? Like, what would you say?
That most of the time you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
That your instincts are probably right.
Yeah. That
things are going to get easier in some ways. They're going to get harder in other ways. You know, your kids are going to get older and things are going to change. But like you said earlier, your marriage and that relationship is so important that, like you said, the best thing you can do for your kids is to love their mum or their dad.
And I just want to say now, like, if anyone's listening to this who has gone through separation or divorce, that like there's like no judgment there. And I think that can still, you know, I really believe in marriage, and I really believe that God is for marriage, but also I believe that if that happens, there are reasons why sometimes that happens, and you can still love their parent through that process. Sorry, I just wanted to say that because I didn't want to alienate anyone who.
Thank you. But that, prioritizing time together and carving that out, prioritizing it in your calendar and making time for that is really important.
And learning, we haven't talked about learning. I said we're coming to the end, but I'm making it a bit longer now. But we haven't talked about like love languages as well, which has been mentioned a couple of times on this podcast. But that's really key, I think, as well, in learning, well, what does your spouse need from you? Because often do you want to explain what love languages are?
The love languages, and there's kind of different ways that you can look at it, and you can Google it and do a little test and things like that. But there are different ways that it's the theory that the way that we like to receive love is often the way that we show love to other people.
And that might not be the way the other person
absolutely
needs it. Yeah.
What would be an example of, what are some of those? How many are there?
5. There's 5 main ones.
5 main in the kind of the core model. Here we go. They are
words of affirmation.
Yeah.
Physical touch.
Yeah.
Quality time. Acts of service. Gifts.
There you go. Have you got a story about thinking about love languages before we got married?
What do you mean?
So as part of the pre-marriage course that HTB run, we kind of, there's some exercises and things to do, and it helps you to think about what your love languages are and what you think others are. And I had a couple of love languages that are for me. I can't remember what they are.
Your quality time.
Quality time, and I was like, Sonia, what are yours?
You can't remember what they are. That's funny. You can't remember what you're.
And your love languages are.
Pretty much all of them.
All of them, yeah.
No, but I think I've changed over the years. I think some are less now, but yeah, I know we did this school thing and mine all came out pretty equally.
You need to be loved in all of those ways at all times.
You were like, oh my goodness, how am I going to deal with this? You're doing well. Well done.
It's good to be aware of those things.
It's good to be aware. And I do think those needs change sometimes. Absolutely. You might have a core, this is your thing, but in the season of like young babies, for example, like maybe it is like just that quality time, or even like acts of service, maybe acts of service, because actually you just want someone to, deal with the baby. I remember when we first had Hudson, and I say we did take to it I think we took to it quite well, but you'd come home from work and I'd just pass you him straight away and you'd be like, oh no, he looks really cozy with you. And I'd be like, no, you've missed him, you have him. And actually like a nice, for you to just like deal with the nappies and all that for an hour or so was just like such a gift. So
there's also love languages for children. That's something you can look at. Look at the way that your children, even though they're growing and changing all the time, like the way that your children like to be loved and things that are important to them.
Yeah, and it's really.
So I can think of that even for our our younger kids, like the different things that they like, the ways that they accept love shown to them.
Yeah, the way they need love shown to them.
Well
yeah. And we often say, don't we, our twins, we've got twin boys then that are 7, and out of all 4 of ours, they are the 2. It's quite interesting. At some point, I'm going to have a multiples chat with someone, like a twin
Who actually knows
twins
what
and
they're
more.
talking about.
Yeah, someone other than us. But yeah, they are the two most
They're the most different of our 4 kids.
out of all of our 4 children, yet they're being raised at exactly the same time.
It's like a little science experiment.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
have, I think with the older 2, you try to treat them the same. But when you have 2 who have been born a minute apart, who have had the same food and the same experiences and pretty much the same everything, but they in themselves are 2 really different people. You know, the way that they have been created, the way that God has imparted and built into them as 2 different people.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to see.
Yeah, it really is. So we're coming to the end of our conversation today. Are we nearly there yet? That phrase that we have certainly heard many times in the car on a journey.
And do your listeners know? Do they know, first of all, that I suggested that as the name
James
for the thing?
did suggest it, yes.
But also, because my brain is full of useless facts, that one of our family's favourite things to do in the car, I think we've grown tired of it, but when you're using Google Maps to navigate, if you're driving along and you ask Google Maps, are we nearly there yet? It tells you like yes or no. But if you ask it again and again and again, like a child would in the car, then you get a fun response. So that is something to try.
I was thinking we haven't done that for ages, but I guess we haven't actually been anywhere.
Yeah.
But like, we're all on a journey as parents. You've been on a journey for like 13 and a half years as a dad. If you could go back to when you first started out as a dad, like what essential items would you pack for that journey that maybe you didn't realise about at the time?
So first off, I one of the jobs that I do in the family when we go somewhere is I like pack the bag of snacks.
Yes.
Sometimes not very well, and it has been a number of times we've got somewhere, and I have woefully underestimated the amount of snacks. So number 1, you can never have too many snacks.
With children, definitely.
With children or even without children, you can never have too many snacks.
True.
But I think for me, it almost goes back to some of the things we talked about right at the beginning. I think because of that experience growing up, part of it of like going away as a family to interesting places, the fact that my dad died when he did, kind of, for me, it's like saying, have those experiences in life that you can look back on as a family and really build on and really have those. Cherish is a great word. Always a great word is cherish. There's a kind of an analogy with your spiritual life as well, isn't it? Sometimes in your spiritual life, there are times you can really look back on and remember, that time is important and that time is significant.
Yeah.
Might be an event or just a quiet time. It can look like all sorts of different things. And I think as a family, having those times that you can look back on a family, those experiences that you've had together, that can be really important as well. And that can look like all sorts of different things,
Yeah, and it draws us closer together. Like those experiences and encounters with God draw us closer to Him. It draws us closer together as a family, those experiences.
Yeah.
So you'd pack experiences or be more
intentional about it. What are the things that you can do? What are the things that maybe if you look back as a child, what are those kind of high points as a family that you remember those good family times together?
Yeah.
How can you be intentional about that in your family that you're part of now to bring yourself together and help to connect? And I think I haven't. That's not something that I've consciously done as growing up. But I think now, as we look back at it over the years of being parents and being family together, you and me, is those kind of we have those great points that we can look back on. And even when times are more difficult, or you're a bit more tired, or when things are more challenging, to have those things that you can look back on and reminisce about together is great.
Yeah, and just having fun, isn't it?
Fun.
Just bringing some fun into the family and the experience, and it's great to have those moments. And it doesn't have to be expensive.
No.
Think of the boys last year.
Absolutely. Yeah, last year it was their birthday, and it was their birthday in April, so we couldn't have a party, couldn't go away and do stuff. And we asked them what is it that you want to do, and they said we want to have a family sleepover in the lounge. So we did.
Yeah, all of us, and which is that doesn't sound like anything amazing, but the kids have done that a few times, but we don't usually join them. But we did, and they said it was like the best birthday ever, didn't they?
Just what are the things that you can do to bring fun and to bring those to create those things that are memories and special moments in your family.
Cherish, that's so good. Oh, well, thank you for joining me
It's fine. I was only sitting over there, so I only had to come over here to the table.
And should we give people a visual that we've been sat under a blanket, haven't we?
Well, normally you do this like over
Zoom with
whatever,
people.
and so you've got a better microphone. So we're just talking into your computer.
Yeah, sat under a blanket, talking into a computer. Very makeshift podcasting type setup here, but
to make sure as good as we can, my suggestion was we sit under a blanket.
Yeah.
So we hope that you've appreciated the excellent audio quality.
Kerith Production are going to be coming after us, I reckon, for tips.
But it's got a bit warm.
Yeah, it has got a bit warm under here. So thank you for joining me on the last episode of this season 2 of Are We Nearly There Yet? And thank you to all of you for listening as well. It's been so great to have you along on this journey with us. We're going to take a bit of a break for a while and be back later in the year. But as ever, if you've got any suggestions, we've already got some conversations lined up for season 3, but if you've got some suggestions, please do get in touch with us. And James mentioned earlier about love languages. We've got have a look at, just Google the love languages book. There's books for within your marriage, for children, love languages as well. But yeah, please do like subscribe to the podcast, leave a little comment. It would be really helpful to just kind of spread the word with other people. But thank you for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you in season 3 for Are We Nearly There Yet?